Welcome to The Debate. I want you to picture a specific person in your office. Maybe it's you, maybe it's your manager. This is the person whose calendar is constantly full, not with, strategic planning meetings, but with quick chats that somehow turn into hour-long therapy sessions. This is the leader who remembers your dog's birthday, but forgets to give you the critical feedback you really need to get promoted. We are looking at a case study today of an anonymous professional, a Hispanic male, mid-career, Enneagram 9, peacemaker, and an MBTI ENFPT.
And let's be really clear about the stakes here. On paper, this profile reads like the ideal servant leader. I mean, he is the antidote to the toxic, yelling boss of the 90s. But looking at the actual data in this file, I'm seeing something much more concerning. I'm seeing a nice guy trap that is actively harming his team's development and, frankly, destroying his own health.
And that is the central tension we're debating. Is this hyper-relational, empathy-first style the future of sustainable organizations? Or is it, as you're suggesting, a recipe for total dysfunction? I take the stance that this subject's diplomat style and his cultural assets, specifically his personalismo, create a level of trust and psychological safety that you simply cannot manufacture with traditional command and control structures.
And I'll be taking the stance that without structural boundaries, this profile's conflict avoidance, specifically what looks like a fawning response to stress, creates a vacuum of authority. The data predicts quiet ruptures in the team and somatic burnout for the leader. He isn't leading, he's absorbing.
Okay, let's dive into the profile then. The Burnout assessment in our source material frames this subject through a specific cultural lens that I think is often misunderstood in, corporate America. This leader embodies personalismo, which is a preference for warm, personal connections over formal institutional ones, and familismo, which is this deep, almost family-like loyalty to the group.
Which sounds poetic, I'll grant you, but how does that actually function when you have P&L responsibility?
It functions as connection-first authority. The assessment notes his high five strengths are coach, strategist, and catalyst. So he drives performance not by coercion, not at all, but by soft power. In a diverse modern workforce where employees are just burned out on transactional relationships, this guy is a magnet. People want to work for him because he treats them like human beings, not resources.
Oh, I don't deny the magnetism. I deny the sustainability. You're talking about familismo? I'm looking at the Skinner analysis in the file, which views this through a much colder lens of behavioral psychology. B.F. Skinner would probably call this escape maintenance leadership.
That sounds incredibly cynical.
It's not cynical, it's mechanical. Escape maintenance just means an organism behaves in a certain way to escape an aversive stimulus. For an Enneagram 9, the aversive stimulus is conflict. It's anger. So when he's being nice or supportive after a deadline is missed, he isn't necessarily doing it to build the employee up. He is doing it to escape the discomfort of a confrontation. He maintains the peace to protect himself from the anxiety of holding a boundary.
I think you are pathologizing kindness. The Loftus assessment argues that he isn't avoiding conflict, he is de-escalating it. And that is a crucial distinction. In a high-stress environment, having a field shaper, as the Lewin analysis calls him, someone who can lower the emotional temperature of the room, is a huge asset. He absorbs the anxiety so the team can actually focus on the work.
But where does that anxiety go? It doesn't disappear. He swallows it. And this leads directly to the favorite-child dynamic referenced in the Perel and Bernal papers. Because he is avoiding friction at all costs, he unconsciously gravitates toward the employees who make him feel safe.
Well, that could just be a mentorship dynamic. Leaders naturally click with certain people.
No, mentorship is based on potential. This is based on comfort. The data shows he creates an invisible, unfair hierarchy. If you are a high performer who challenges him or brings up tough problems, you are high friction, so he distances himself. If you are a mediocre performer who offers him that loyalty, that familismo, you get access. It creates a culture where being nice to the boss is a better career strategy than doing good work. That isn't a family, that's a court.
I'm just not convinced by the court analogy, because his DISC influence score shows he is universally liked. He builds consensus. He makes work meaningful by connecting tasks to a shared story. That's what we call meaning-making, and it's the #1 retention tool we have.
Retention of whom, though? The mediocre people who need a parent, or the high performers who want a boss? This brings us to the K-cast assessment regarding boundary diffusion. Because he has that deep Enneagram 9 tendency to merge with others, the team loses its ability to self-regulate. They become dependent on him to fix their emotional state for them.
Or they feel supported enough to take risks. But I do want to circle back to your point about conflict. You seem completely convinced that his diplomat style is just a cover for fear.
I am. And the evidence is right there in the phenomenon of the quiet rupture.
Define that for us.
It's the cycle described in the Ennea Basics source. The peacemaker suppresses their anger and judgment to keep everything smooth. So they say, it's fine, don't worry about it, 5 times in a row. But they aren't actually letting it go, they are banking the resentment. And eventually, the bank overflows. And that's when you get a sudden enforcement.
The moment he snaps.
Exactly. And this is where the Skinner analysis is most damning. It describes variable ratio reinforcement. Imagine a slot machine. You pull the lever, nothing. Pull it again, nothing. Pull it a third time, jackpot. That unpredictability is what keeps you addicted. This leader is the same way, but with anger. Most of the time, he's the nice guy. But then randomly, when he's stressed, he becomes rigid or cold. The employee never knows which version of the boss they are going to get.
Okay, that inconsistency is a fair critique.
It's more than fair. It's toxic. The Skinner analysis points out that inconsistent reinforcement causes massive anxiety. The team starts walking on eggshells. They interpret his silent withdrawal as a punishment. But because he never gave clear feedback to begin with, they have no idea what they did wrong. Clarity is kindness, as the saying goes, and this leader is being profoundly unkind by being vague.
I'll concede that a lack of clear feedback is a vulnerability. However, the lore analysis suggests a Capricorn overlay to his personality that I think we are ignoring. There is a hidden ambition and a discipline here. He isn't soft because he's weak, he's soft because he believes it's the best strategy. So my position is that we don't need him to stop being a peacemaker, we need him to, operationalize it.
Operationalize it how?
Through what the Stewart assessment calls dignified directness. He has the empathy to deliver hard news without destroying the person on the other side. That is a rare superpower. Most managers are either too nice and they say nothing, or they're too harsh and they destroy the relationship. This subject has the potential to hit that radical candor sweet spot. He just needs the confidence to use it.
Confidence isn't the only issue. We need to talk about the physical cost. I mean, we cannot ignore the Sarno assessment in this file. It is frankly alarming.
You're referring to the section on somatic symptoms.
I am. Dr. John Sarno's work on TMS, tension myositis syndrome, is cited here. The theory is that the brain induces physical pain to distract the conscious mind from repressed emotional rage. This leader is repressing so much irritation to maintain his diplomat persona that his body is literally keeping the score. The file lists headaches, fatigue, a feeling of heaviness.
The rescuer trap is physically exhausting, no doubt.
It's fawning. That is the trauma response. When he feels threatened by a demand or a conflict, his strategy for safety is to appease the other person. Sarno points out guilt-based boundaries. He feels actual physiological guilt like a pit in his stomach when he even thinks about saying no. So to avoid that sensation, he says yes. He overfunctions. He does the work for his team.
And that leads directly to the high-functioning burnout we mentioned in the intro.
It's a biological escape hatch. If he won't stop working, his body will make him stop. He will get a migraine, he will get sick. The Sarno assessment predicts that if he doesn't learn to express his anger and hold boundaries, he is heading for a medical event. This isn't just about leadership style anymore, it's about survival.
I agree, the risk is real. But I disagree with the root cause. You are framing this as a personality defect, that he is too nice or too fawning. But the Lewin analysis, field theory again, suggests behavior is a function of the person and their environment.
You're blaming the system?
I'm blaming the system's exploitation of his nature. Corporate structures are designed to consume resources. If you drop a servant leader with familismo values into a grinder that prioritizes quarterly profits over human well-being, of course the system will eat him alive. It will take every ounce of his overfunctioning and ask for more.
So he's a victim?
He's a resource that is being mismanaged. The solution isn't to tell him to become a cold, unfeeling bureaucrat. That would destroy his unique value, his ability to build that family loyalty. The solution is operational counterweights.
Walk me through that.
He needs an external structure that protects him from his own instincts. The file suggests pairing him with a strong operator or a bad cop, someone who handles the rigid details and the scheduling, allowing him to be the visionary catalyst without also being the doormat. You don't ask the engine to also be the brakes.
Okay, I like the idea of counterweights, but I don't think he can outsource the bad cop role entirely. If he wants to be the leader, he has to be the one to hold the line. The Perel and Skinner files both converge on this. You cannot lead people if you cannot withstand their disappointment.
Withstanding disappointment. That's the key skill he's missing.
Exactly. He thinks that if someone is unhappy with him, the relationship is broken. He needs to learn that rupture and repair is how relationships actually grow. Avoiding the rupture means you never get the repair and the relationship just stays superficial.
So let's pivot to the practicals then. We have a leader with what the file calls strategic imagination and incredible empathy, but who is drowning in people-pleasing. How do we fix this?
The file recommends rituals of truth.
Which is a fancy way of saying,
Write it down. It has to be externalized. If he gives feedback in a nice chat, it just evaporates into the ether of his charisma. The employee leaves thinking, he's such a great guy, not, I need to fix this error. If he writes it down, if there is a scorecard, a checklist, a written summary, it becomes an objective standard.
it moves the conflict from being me versus you to us versus the standard.
Precisely. And that relieves his guilt. He isn't being mean, he is just upholding the written agreement. It protects the team from that variable ratio anxiety because the rules don't change based on his mood.
And it aligns with his builder archetype. He wants to build people up. He just needs to reframe accountability, not as punishment, but as construction. You can't build a house without a blueprint in a level.
And you can't build a team if you're too afraid to tell them the wall is crooked.
I think we are finding a synthesis here. This subject represents a necessary evolution in leadership. We need his personalismo. We need that warmth. But as you've pointed out so clearly, warmth without structure is just heat, and eventually it just burns you out.
He needs to transition from being a peacemaker, which is passive and merging, to being a peace builder.
I love that distinction, a peace builder.
Real peace requires friction. It requires saying no so that your yes actually has value. It requires allowing people to struggle so they can grow, rather than constantly rescuing them to make yourself feel useful.
It reminds me of that line from the summary. The kindest thing you can do is hold a boundary.
At the end of the day, it's the only sustainable thing you can do.
So to our listeners who see themselves in this profile, who feel that guilt in their stomach every time they have to deliver bad news, take this as a permission slip. Your empathy is a gift, but it needs a container. Build the rituals, write it down, get an operational partner.
And stop trying to be everyone's favorite parent. Be their leader. They might like you less in the moment, but they will respect you more in the long run. And more importantly, you won't go home with a migraine every night.
That seems like the right place to end it. This has been a fascinating look into the mechanics of the so-called nice boss.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time on The Debate.